Kia ora team and welcome to our 8th video on Achievement Standard 91328. Today we are looking at skill learning. Learning outcome for today is to be able to list and describe methods of learning, types of practice and the 3 stages of learning. Alright, let's look at methods of learning. A skill can be defined as a learned act or task that has an end result requiring voluntary body movement to be performed properly. When learning or teaching a skill, we can use a variety of approaches. There is the whole method, part method, whole part whole method, and the progressive part method. Let's take a look at the whole method. The skill is first demonstrated and then practiced as a whole from start to finish. This method helps the learner get a feel for the skill, its timings, and end product. It is best used for fast skills that cannot easily be separated into subparts. This type of learning is unsuitable for people who have a low attention span or for complex or dangerous skills. A skill we might consider using the whole method of learning for is catching. Catching is a fast skill and cannot generally be broken down into subparts. Now, depending on the stage of the learner, you could adjust the size and shape of the ball to vary the difficulty of the method. For example, we may use a larger and softer ball when teaching a new learner the skill of catching. Part method. The parts of the skill are practiced in isolation, which is useful for complicated skills. This method is good for maintaining motivation and focusing on specific elements of the skill. The transfer of the skills from parts to a whole may not always be effective, and it may also reduce the kinesthetic awareness or feel for the full skill, which is, I guess, one negative to using this method. A skill we might consider using the part method for is a layup. To successfully complete a lap, you need to have a strong grasp of a number of skills. You need to be a proficient dribbler, jumper, and shooter. However, you can see how mastering each of these will not necessarily transfer into a technically correct layup. To join the subparts, you need to understand how to gather the ball, use appropriate footwork to avoid a travelling violation, jump off the correct foot, which can be dependent on your position in relation to the basket or the hand in which you're using to shoot, gripping the ball effectively using a high arm, and finally, how to use the backboard to assist laying the ball into the basket. Whole part whole method. This is where the whole skill is first demonstrated and practiced before being broken down into the required parts. Learners can practice the individual elements and improve on these before putting the whole skill back together. This can be very effective in skills which have easily distinguished parts, where the whole skill together is complex. So this type of learning would be suitable for our last example of a layup. Another good example comes in swimmer. The learner could practice the whole stroke and then isolate a weak component such as the kick. Using a float in the hands to ensure that the learner is only using their legs isolates that part of the skill to practice or develop. Then the entire stroke will be put back together. This gives the performer a sense of the whole skill before they break it down and improve on the weak aspects of their performance. As with the part method, this may affect the transfer of the skill from the parts to the whole. Progressive part method. This is sometimes known as the chaining method, as the parts of the skill are practiced individually in order before being linked together and expanded. For example, in a triple jump, the hop will be practiced and learnt before the skip is then practiced and learnt, then the two are linked together. Finally, the jump will be learnt individually and then tagged onto the end of the skip. This is a slow process, but allows weaknesses to be targeted and for the performer to understand the relationship of the subroutines. Now we're going to take a look at types of practice. Certain skills are best taught in different ways depending on the learner and the skill in question. There are 4 main types of practice that can be used in different situations and depending on the skill being learned. First of all, there's fixed practice, massed practice, variable practice, and finally distributed practice. Let's have a look at fixed practice. These are sometimes also known as drills and involves repeatedly practicing a whole skill in order to strengthen the motor program. The environment in which the skill is practiced must remain constant. An advantage of this type of practice is that information processing demands are low. However, it's not suitable for open skills. This type of practice is best for a skill that is relatively close, such as shooting free throws in basketball. Massed practice. This is a continuous form of practice which is best suited for simple skills. Massed practice can be good for experienced athletes who are highly motivated with good fitness levels. It can be difficult for new learners who can struggle with boredom and a lack of concentration. An example would be a rally in badminton where the learner must repeatedly perform drop shots. This causes fatigue and therefore simulates the late stages of a game. Variable practice. This involves practicing a skill in varying situations. The environment in which the skills are practiced is constantly changing. An advantage of this type of practice is opportunity to practice the skill in a game-specific environment. However, it's not very suitable for closed skills. An example of variable practice could be shooting practice in football, where the coach may set up drills and alter the starting position and involvement of defenders. This mimics game situations. The last type of practice we're going to look at is distributed practice. This is when attempts at the skill are divided up with intervals in between to allow for rest and mental rehearsal. It's good for most skill learning, but particularly good for beginners and learners with low levels of motivation and fitness. A disadvantage, however, may be that this type of practice is more time consuming and skills may have to be reintroduced after each break. Distributed practice often occurs during small group instruction. After practicing a skill, a break allows feedback to be given by the coach or instructor before athletes can have another attempt trying to implement the adjustments or the feedback that they've received. Now we're going to have a look at stages of learning. When considering how skills are taught, we like to teach Fitz and Posner's stages of learning model. In 1976, Fitz and Posner suggested that the learning process is sequential and that we move through specific phases as we learn. There are 3 stages to learning a new skill. There's the cognitive stage, associative stage, and autonomous stage. Now, throughout the years, other academics have researched and developed a variety of different models looking at how we learn. Other interesting ideas include Galligan's transfer of learning theory, which suggests that learning can occur from skill to skill, theory to practice, and training to competition. The Whitmore learning cycle states that we cycle through 4 stages when learning a skill. Unconscious incompetence, which suggests there's no understanding. Conscious incompetence, meaning low performance, but recognition of flaws and weak areas. Conscious competence, which is improved performance through conscious effort. And unconscious competence, which is higher performance through natural automatic effort. But for this unit, we are only going to focus on Fitz and Posner's model. Cognitive stage. The cognitive stage is characterized by the learners trying to work out exactly what needs to be done. Considerable thought is typically required and movements are controlled in a relatively conscious way. Distributed practice is best suited at this stage of learning because the learner can become bored, frustrated, and easily fatigued. So this is the stage where a beginner learner would step in. During a stage of learning, the attentional demands are high. Learner movements lack synchronization and appear choppy and deliberate. There are also numerous errors, and the learner generally lacks the capability to determine the cause of their errors. This is why a distributed approach to practice is more suitable at this stage. Next stage is the associative stage. This is characterized by more subtle movement adjustments. The movement outcome is more reliable and movements are more consistent from trial to trial. Inefficient contractions are gradually reduced and the movement becomes more efficient. Massed practice is best suited at this stage of learning because the athlete can put together parts of the skill in a sequence and begin to learn them in an open skill format. So athletes are starting to get a little bit more consistent at this stage as attentional demands for movement production decreases. Far less errors occur and athletes become better at understanding how to identify and correct their own errors. The final stage that we can get to is the autonomous stage. After extensive practice, an athlete may reach the autonomous stage, which is characterized by fluent and seemingly effortless motions. Movements are not only accurate with little error, but also very consistent. The skill is performed largely automatically at this stage with very little thought required. Variable practice is best suited here as this offers the athlete a wide range of practice options as well as sport-specific skill development. This is the highest level of proficiency that not all learners will reach. Attention and practice can be reallocated to strategic decision making to ensure continued success at the highest level. Thank you for watching this video. Quite a long one today compared to the earlier ones, but really important as we begin considering the best approach to learning and developing new skills. So please complete your worksheet and we'll have a chat about this in your next theory lesson. Cheers.